Good evening, all. Disciples India Learning Forum presenting you 114th learning session. Experience the joy of learning. Request you all to kindly mute your phone. Possibly can sit in a place where you are not disturbed. Request to ask questions at the end of the session. Remember, a new learning is always difficult initially, but becomes a habit eventually. Today's agenda: welcome and introduction to the guest speaker, journey so far, DILF, guest speakers, introduction and session. DILF Forum, Disciples India Group Bangalore, is happy to present a platform where purely for the joy of learning, it is envisaged to be an exciting learning platform where like-minded individuals and organizations can come together, share experiences, learn and grow as individuals, professionals, and organizations. Our objectives to provide a platform to share and exchange ideas and experiences to create and develop personal and professional network of learners, to enhance effective communication and leadership skills, to foster learning and contribute for personal and professional and organizational development. To update with life management skills and contribute as an effective member to the society. Disciples India Learning Forum Organizing Committee members 2023, Dr. A.M. Suresh, Forum Advisor, Dr. B. Rupashri Tantri, President, Mr. Shivprasad K.M., Vice President, Mrs. Madhumati L., Secretary, Mrs. Viraja R., Joint Secretary, Mr. Akhilesh N.N., Assistant Secretary, and Mr. Dilip A.P., Executive Member. Disciples India Learning Forum sessions. 2018, 4 sessions. 2019, 25 sessions. 2020, 24 sessions. 2021, 8 sessions. 2022, 24 sessions. And so far, a total of 113 sessions in a span of 5 years. And this is 114th session. So 113th session was presented on the topic of English language, international test orientation for abroad studies by our guest speaker, Mr. Zulkar Naim, distinguished linguist, educator and researcher in English language. So now we present the present session, learning session, 114th online learning session in accordance with NEP 2020, Disciples India Learning Forum in association with Aganasha Consulting LLP, Yelahanka, Bangalore presents this learning session on the topic Achieving Happiness Through Spirituality. Our guest speaker, Mrs. Sharada T. Dear Madam, we heartily welcome you. So may I now request for the guest speaker introduction?
Yes, madam. Heartily welcome to you, madam. Mrs. Sharda T is doing her spiritual practice under the able guidance of Sanatan Sansthan since 25 years. She is working as head of the Department of Physics of Nagarjuna College of Engineering and Technology, Bangalore. She conducts spiritual discourse at various places. She also takes part in TV debate, channel debates. She also presents TV programs on various aspects of Sanatan Dharma. So heartily welcome to you, madam. Thanks for being in the session.
Thank you, sir.
May we now begin the session, ma'am?
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Let me share my screen.
Please.
Veerasha madam, you have to stop your screen share.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Is it visible, madam?
Yes, madam.
Yes, madam, it is visible. You can just start.
Okay. Namaskar to all of you. I'm very delighted to be a part of this session. And I thank Dr. Rupashri madam for giving me an opportunity to present the concept, which is very wide, achieving happiness through spirituality. I pay my obeisance to my Guru, Sachidananda Parabrahma, Dr. Jayant Balaji Atwale, who is the founder of Sanatan Sanstha. Under the able guidance of Dr. Jayant Balaji Atwale, I'll be able to present this concept to all of you. We know the word happiness is always pulls us towards that. All of us to get something out of this particular session, right? So what exactly we need is the happiness. Our quest for happiness is always active, alive, and we always think of being happy. And we know that for what purpose we are here on this earth, right? We have a goal. We might have set a goal for our life. And that may be some short-term targets, some long-term targets, which actually takes us to our main goal. Most of the times it happens so in this busy life, we are not able to stop a while and think about what exactly is the goal of our life. We most of the times forget about our goal of life and keep on engaging ourselves in the day-to-day activities of our life. We know a lot of distractions are there for us in this world, due to which we will not be able to exactly make out what is the goal of our life. Sometimes we keep a note of it, we try to practice it, but most of the times it gets missed out of our list and we keep on doing the day-to-day course. But for the reason for what we are born here is what we are really supposed to think. We know we are born for two reasons. One is to achieve that supreme bliss. We want that happiness which is in continuity is called as bliss. So we are always thinking of getting that happiness. We have the supreme soul within us, which is basically having the complete enlightened soul. But what happens most of the times in our day-to-day life, we are so much merged with it, we will not be able to identify that light which is there within us. So we tend to see that most of our life, almost 30% of the time we are happy, and another 40% we are unhappy, and another 30% we are neutral in our activities. So why this is so? We see that the unhappiness is more than happiness. right? Most of our life, if we just go back and have a glance, sit for a while and just think, our unhappiness is more. Why? This is a question, right? So all of us have a question why we are unhappy. Because we are trying to find the happiness in the things which are not constant. We are trying to get the happiness from the worldly things. You know, the only constant thing in the nature is that it gets changed. So it is always changing. And from the changing concept, we cannot get the eternal happiness. That is what we call it as bliss. So what is the cause for unhappiness? Example, if I take, I like a particular sweet. Let me consider jalebi or jamun or whatever is my favorite dish. If I eat once, I feel very good. The second piece of jamun, when I start eating, it's okay. Third piece, it's fine. But when I start eating 8 or 9 jamuns or 9 jalebis, what is going to happen? I'm not at all happy. The first jalebi, what happiness it gave me, I'm not able to get the same happiness when I'm eating the ninth jalebi. Why is so? It can be with respect to any of our dishes that we take, right? All of us feel like that, no? Why is that? Because we are trying to get the happiness from the thing which is not permanent. So that is the reason we are experiencing this kind of unhappiness. In all our life, whatever we see, we have very small amount of happiness, and maybe the size of a barley. But always we have problems which are like a mountain. One or the other problems are coming into our life because of which we are not happy. We are unhappy due to all these causes, whatever it might be. For there are some reasons for which we feel that we are happy, but if we think about ourselves, we will come to know basically we are unhappy, we are not happy. Happiness means it should last for long. It should be there forever. Do we have that kind of happiness within us? No, right? I hope all of you agree with me. We may be happy for a while when we achieve something, or when our children achieve something, or when our brothers or sisters, siblings, somebody achieves something, we are happy. And that lasts for a very short amount of time. And if something happens again we are unhappy. So that means the constant happiness is not with us. So what to do for that? Because we are facing lot of problems in our daily life. Sometimes we may feel it is not so. I'm happy. I'm always okay. But when situation comes, when there is a problem arises, when there is a very critical situation, how do we act? How do we behave? Matters a lot. Again, at that instant of time, if we are happy, truly we can say that we are a happy person. But most of us are feeling in that particular situation, we cannot be happy at most of the times, most of the critical situations, right? So because of that, we are not able to maintain that state of happiness throughout our life. And due to which we always quest for getting happiness, right? So we go out, we want to go for a trip, we go outside with our family, friends. Why? We want to be happy. We want to do a particular accomplishment. Why? I want to be happy. I want to buy something for me because I want to be happy. So for all our activities, somebody's mic is on. Can you please mute it? Okay. So for all the course that we are doing every day, it is for the quest of that happiness. But most of the times we are not getting it. We try various things. For some days, for few minutes, for few hours, we may be happy, but again that happiness goes off. So in order to have this permanent happiness, or why we are unhappy, let us first find out that we find out the cause of unhappiness, later we can find the happiness. See, this is the picture of our soul. Actually, we cannot draw the picture, right? So this is just a symbolic representation of our soul, which we call it as jiva. So this soul basically comprises of the soul around which we have five senses, the mind and the intellect. And this is what is inside. Whatever we see, the inside, that is soul, is having the supreme bliss. So supreme bliss, as I said, it is the permanent light which is there inside us. So this is the part of that Paramatma, which is the eternal happiness. But we are not able to identify this. So what we do is we try to get the happiness from the materialistic world, from outside. But the happiness is there within us. We are not able to find out that happiness because of the various reasons. So let us just find out what are the causes of this. An average human being, as we see here in the screen, an average human being is having a soul like this, which I called it as jiva. And you know, there is a black covering around our soul. You know how bright the light may be. If it is covered with smoke, dust, we cannot see that light, right? So similarly, our supreme soul, what is there inside us, is covered with all this darkness. This darkness we have to remove. How to remove this darkness is a question. Once we remove this darkness, this becomes a Jivatma. And later on, it becomes Shivatma. It goes to Shivadasa. So what is that we see here is from an average human being, which is covered with the black covering around the soul, which is called as avidya. This avidya has to be removed. How to remove this avidya is by doing the spiritual practice. By doing the spiritual practice, we can remove this avidya around our soul. And once we start removing it, you see that the light within start glowing outside. And finally, when we have God realization, the avidya goes off, and what remains, our soul goes to Shiva Dasha. So that is a final liberation, which we call it as moksha. Moksha is nothing but the continuous happiness, the eternal bliss. You will not be unhappy for any moment, for all the situations, for all whatever may come, you will be happy. So that is what is the state of the soul. So now we got to know from this that the doing spiritual practice is the only method to remove the black covering around our soul. Once we start removing the black covering around the soul, what happens? The light within glows off, and then we can see that we are happy forever. And what is this spiritual practice? Why we need to do the spiritual practice? Now, we will consider a person. You can see on the screen a person who is in misery, who is having unhappiness, who is having lot of problems in his life. Once he start doing spiritual practice, what happens? His inner light starts glowing, and a spiritual cover, as you see, a spiritual covering is created around him. And that is due to the cleansing. So we do external cleansing, right? We take bath every day, we clean our clothes, we keep everything clean. But why we are not cleaning inside? Our soul, we are not cleaning it. So the black covering, we are not cleaning it. So due to which what happens, we are not able to get that energy. So in order to clean it from within, we have to do spiritual practice. Once we do spiritual practice, you see that there is a covering which is created. So which is being scientifically studied now with various scientific instruments, that the aura of a person before doing spiritual practice and after doing spiritual practice gets enhanced. So that is the advantage of doing this spiritual practice, right? Once a soul gets enlightened, you see the person where to the extreme right, where this person is doing spiritual practice and he is also getting the energy from the space. So this is what happens once we start doing the spiritual practice, and the person will be blissful always. So he will experience that bliss, that is a continuous happiness. So now we got to know what is the importance of doing the spiritual practice and what is the necessity of doing the spiritual practice. Most of the times it happens so that we are doing our daily course, we are not able to do all that, how to spare time for doing the spiritual practice. So this might be a question arising in your mind, right? We have heard of sages sitting for thousands of years, chanting, doing all meditation, and finally attaining the liberation. In this era of Kali Yuga, is it possible for us to sit and do all these things? Definitely not, because our mind itself is not concentrated. We cannot concentrate on any of the things for a long time. That is due to the black covering around our soul. But there are ways through which we can achieve liberation, and which has been said by various saints of this era. So we see that once we start doing spiritual practice, we can get to know that the concept of the spirituality, and thereby we start getting that bliss for few seconds, for few minutes, and then it gets expanded to a very larger amount of time, and finally it will be eternal. You see, most why spiritual practice is required, we will understand that. Most of our problems that we face in our life is, we can distribute according to this chart that we see on the screen. 20% of our problem will be due to psychological or physical cause, and another 30% is spiritual, psychological, or physical issues. And remaining 50% of the problems are purely spiritual in nature. If we see, so totally 80% of the problems in our life are purely spiritual in nature. And most of the times what we do is we start finding the solution in a very gross level. Wherever there is a spiritual problem, we go for solutions which are at physical level or at psychological level. So our problems doesn't get sorted out. It doesn't get solved because we are not treating exactly the problem what we are facing. If there is a spiritual problem, then the solution also must be spiritual. So how to find a spiritual solution? That is again by doing the spiritual practice. So whatever disease we have, so it has to be diagnosed properly, and for the same disease the medicine has to be given. If we take a general medicine, probably our disease does not get cured, right? So in the same way, if we have a spiritual problem, we have to solve it through spiritual solutions only. And those spiritual solution is again through the spiritual practice. So spiritual practice will help us to move from unhappiness to happiness, and to solve our problems which are on the way to in our life. Like we have the physiological, psychological problem, we have physical problems, we have spiritual problems. If you are able to give solution for 80% of the problems in your life, another 20% will not be an issue to solve. So we have to go, there is no other solution for all these problems other than the spiritual practice. What exactly is spiritual practice? So theoretically, we may read many books, we may get the knowledge, we may not, if we are not putting it into practice, then spirituality has no solution. Spirituality purely is action-based. It is what you experience. Theoretical knowledge, the intellect part of it is only 2%, but the practical knowledge, what we get it when we actually practice, when we put it into action, that gives, that actually weighs 98%. So because of which, what is happening here is that we may be knowing certain things as the part of our spiritual practice, but if we are not putting it into practice, then it is of no use. So we can understand a story. Through the story, we can understand this concept. So there was a person, a boatman was there. There was a river. His daily core was to take the people from one bank, the bank of the river, to the other bank of the river. And there comes a person who is very intelligent, who is a Vidwan, and he wanted to travel from this end of the river to the other end of the river. So the person sat in the boat, and the boatsman started taking his boat forward. And on the way, this person, the Vidwan, started asking the boatsman, asking like, have you read this particular book? Have you read this particular Bhagavad Gita? Have you read this particular Guru Charitra? All that he started asking. That fellow, poor fellow, said, I have not read anything. So they were in the middle of the river. What happened? Suddenly, there was a small hole in the boat. Then the boatman asked this intellectual person that, sir, have you read any book on swimming? Then that fellow said, yes, I have read many books on swimming. Then, do you know swimming? Then this person got to know, I don't know swimming. The boatsman just put himself on the river and he started swimming. And he told, sir, if you know swimming, save your life. So this is what happens. We may read 100 books, but if you're not putting that into practice, then it will not save us. So by this, we can understand putting it into practice is so much important than just knowing it. So with this note, now we will understand exactly what kind of spiritual practice that we are supposed to follow. When we see that spiritual practice, we see different paths for achieving the God realization. Right? All of us might have known about this, like we call it as Bhakti Yoga, which is a path of devotion. Then Nama Sankirtana Yoga, the path of chanting. Karmakand. Karmakand is what? The path of ritualistic worship. We do various ritualistic worship. Through that we can attain, we can get the God realization or the supreme eternal liberation. Then we have Karma Yoga, the path of action, which is based on Karma Phala Siddhanta. Then we have Dhyana Yoga, that is through the path of meditation. And we have the Jnana Yoga, which is the path of knowledge, getting the knowledge, and through that knowledge, having the liberation. And Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga is the rigorous physical exercise through which we can achieve the liberation. Then Kundalini Yoga. So that is the path of spiritual energy, where the energy flows from Mooladhara Chakra to Sahasrara Chakra, and then it comes back to Mooladhara. So these are the various, few of the paths I'm just mentioning over here. There are various paths. So according to the principle of spirituality, there are as many ways as the number of people on this earth. So that means those many possible ways are there for final liberation. Each one of us are unique, right? We have different goal. We are from different region. We are from different creed, gender, what all, you can see diversity over here. But all of us are intentionally going to find something that is happiness. So that is our common goal, to achieve that happiness or final liberation. It is not just only human beings, it is the all creatures on this earth. If we refer, all of them are questing for this happiness. If we consider an ant, if you have a fire at one side and if you have the heap of sugar at the other side, obviously ant wants to go towards the sugar heap. So That is the reason why all beings, all living beings are intended to get this happiness and through various paths. And after all these paths, we have a path. Whatever path we follow, we need a guru who can guide us. We cannot achieve the final liberation without the guidance of doing spiritual practice. So the one who guides us is called as Guru. The founder of Sanatan Sanstha, His Holiness Dr. Jayan Balaji Atwale, has found an easier solution or another path of spiritual progress that is called as Guru Krupa Yoga. Through Bhakti Yoga, Nama Sankirtana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, in whatever way you practice spirituality, finally you need a person, you need a guru, a principle, which will take you to the final liberation. So without the guru's grace, we are not able to reach that final liberation. So that is the path which is called as Guru Krupa Yoga. We will understand what exactly we need to do through this path of spiritual practice. So when we talk about this Guru Krupa Yoga, we can see that it is an 8-folded concept. What is there in each of it, we are going to see in a little detail and understand what exactly we have to do. As we already know, knowing is just only 2%, and putting it into practice is what takes us to the final liberation. Like I may explain 100 things about sugar, but once you put it into your mouth only, you can understand the sweetness of the sugar. So here also we have this path of spirituality which takes us to the final liberation. There are people who are practicing, putting it into practice and achieving, they are towards the path of this liberation and finding the eternal happiness. So what exactly this Guru Krupa Yoga tells us? So this is actually a combination of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. So all this is there in this Guru Krupa Yoga. What we see here, as you see on the screen, we have the various parts or various aspects of this particular Guru Krupa Yoga, where it starts with the chanting of the name of the God, and then being in the company of the truth, which we call it as Satsanga. Then the third one is service unto the truth, the Sat Seva. And then comes the sacrifice in various ways. And then comes the spiritual love. And then we have the ego removal and the personality defect removal and the spiritual emotion. So these are the 8 folds of this Guru Krupa Yoga, which finally takes us to the eternal bliss, which is happiness. So what exactly we mean by this? So let us understand it and try to put it into practice. Chanting the name of God. When I talk about the chanting the name of God, we can chant the name of the God to the religion to which we belong. Especially if in the country with which we are proceeding, or in the Hindu Dharma, we have our own family deity. We can start chanting the name of our family deity. And the another chanting that is prescribed here is the chant of Sri Dattatreya. Sri Dattatreya is the God who is taking care of all our departed souls. So we can chant Sri Gurudeva Datta at least 1 hour per day. And there is a universal chant that is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This chant actually is beneficial for all of us who want to proceed towards the spiritual practice and attain that eternal bliss. So this is the chanting the name of God, because we need an energy, and that energy comes from the chanting the name of God. So that is the first step in the Guru Krupa Yoga. Then comes being in the company of the truth. So that is the Satsanga, where we talk about that eternal bliss. We talk about the path of God realization. We only talk about the permanent happiness, and where we all sit together and then try to reach that particular God through our spiritual practice. And that spiritual practice, when we start doing it, what happens? When we are in the company of the people who are also doing spiritual practice, our spiritual energy gets boosted up. So, because the thoughts that we get are purely related to spirituality, purely related to the permanent truth. So, that is why what happens? We get motivation, we start doing the practice, that is the spiritual practice. And how others are doing, we can get to know through this satsang. And the next one we have is Sat Seva. Basically, Sat Seva means doing the service unto the truth. So, what is the truth? That is the spreading of spirituality. We can do service unto the spreading of spirituality. So, I am just observing, I am just practicing, I am just feeling that happiness. So, I want others also to be happy so that I can spread a word, I can tell about this. So, let others also get this happiness. Without any expectation, I can tell about whatever the way that I am following and let others also follow it and get this happiness. So, this is what is the spreading of the truth, and that is Sat Seva. So, there are various methods through which we can do Sat Seva, and whoever is interested can connect it to us later on so that you can also continue doing this Sat Seva. And then comes the sacrifice. We talked about sacrifice. You know, sacrifice, when we talk about at various levels, we can do the sacrifice. So it can be in terms of the what I can say, that it is with the physical body. I can do some service physically, go and clean the area where we are having a satsang, or do some physical activity through which you are just sacrificing your body. And then you can do it at a mental level, because pulling out our mind from all these worldly things and putting it in the God's name, that is again a one kind of sacrifice itself. Or the easiest way of sacrifice is giving the donation or giving an offering. So that is an easiest kind of sacrifice. At different levels, we start doing this sacrifice so that we can try to forget ourselves and move towards the God realization. And that is again the happiness. And next we have is the spiritual love. Nowadays, we are hearing about the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, right? So Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, it means the whole world is one family. How can I feel that? It is by the spiritual love. In all our day-to-day love, whatever we have with respect to our spouse, our children, our brothers, our parents, so there is always an expectation, right? So if some relatives comes to our house, we treat them very nicely, keeping an intention in our mind, like when I go there, they must also treat me in a good way, right? So there are a lot of expectations in all our day-to-day relationships where we feel that we have that love. But basically, the spiritual love means love without any expectation. Love without any expectation. I am not expecting anything in return. So that kind of love we are supposed to develop in ourselves, that is possible only when we start doing this spiritual practice. I'm not expecting anything, but still I have love towards others. So that is what will lead to the step where we talk about the spiritual love, which is also called as Preeti. Then the very important aspect of this Guru Krupa Yoga is the ego removal. This is one of the major hurdle in our life, because most of the times we feel that I am great, I am doing good, and I am the one who is best. Most of the times, these kind of thoughts are there in our mind. Most of the times, we keep the doership in us. I have done this and I have done all these things. I am great. I am able to do all this. So such kind of thoughts. So that is actually the ego which is inside us is manifested. It can be in the form of a doership, or it can be in the form of the prestige, or it can be in the form of the, what I can say, that feeling superior to others or feeling inferior to others is also a kind of ego. And this ego is a big hurdle. We know that in our day-to-day life also, and also in the spiritual journey. Until and unless we try to remove this ego, it is not possible for us to progress in spiritual world. So to have the spiritual progress, it is necessary to remove this ego. How to remove this ego? We have a question in mind, right? So for every action, for every thought, whenever I have done something, rather than thinking like that, I can think that this is done by, or this happens, or this has happened only because of the Guru's grace, or only because of others, or I can think that it can happen, it has happened only because of the God. And likewise, we can start thinking. Because rather than keeping the doership in us, give it to others. So it is all because of all your help, this could happen, right? So when we start thinking like that, what happens? Our ego starts subsidizing, and a day may come where we may have very small amount of ego that is required until we reach the liberation. But as of now, the ego component in us is too high. Maybe we are egoistic because, or we are very proud because of the education that we have, the family we are born in, or the company where we work. So many concepts are there here. So many things are there here, which always keeps our ego up. And that is a big hurdle in our spiritual practice. Then the other important point here is the personality defect removal. So this personality defect removal is very much necessary in today's world. We see a lot of issues. We see, like you see on the screen, we are with anger, envy, we are emotional, we are pride, we feel insecurity, we are judgmental. So many these personality defects are there in us. Because of that, the black covering that we saw around our soul is all due to such kind of defects, personality defects in us. And these personality defects will not allow us to progress forward. Because as I said, to have spiritual love, you should be without expectation. But what happens? We have anger, we envy others. So because of all these things, what happens? We are not able to identify, or we are not able to clear that black covering which is around our soul. So removal of this personality defect is one of the important aspects of this Guru Kripa Yoga, where we understand what are the personality defects that we have, we list them, we analyze them, we give auto suggestions to remove these personality defects, and to improve our personality, what kind of qualities we are supposed to develop in us. That also we are going to work on this, and later on we can achieve the state where we have very less amount of personality defect, and as we grow spiritually further, the personality defects subsidize, and a day comes where we are able to lead a life without any expectations, without any personality defect, that actually leads to final happiness. So this is the important aspect of the personality defect removal and personality improvement. And then we have the final point of this, the 8th point of this Guru Kripa Yoga that we have already seen, that is the spiritual emotion. Spiritual emotion is one where you feel the presence of God every time. Whatever actions you do, you feel that you are doing in front of the God. So you are keeping the keeping in mind that the presence of God, and in the presence of God, you're going to do all these activities, right? So that is what is called as spiritual emotion. So the best example for spiritual emotion is Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So he was always thinking that the Ma Kali was in front of him. So whatever the offering that he used to have, keep it in front of Kali Mata. So he used to always feel that the Kali Mata is present in front of him. So he is one who is having the spiritual emotion. So we also need to develop such kind of spiritual emotion, which actually takes us the forward in the spiritual progress. So we see in our day-to-day life, most of our life, what is that we have? We are comprised of two components. One is the destiny, which is taking us, and other one is there is a free will. So most of us in this era of Kali Yuga are having 65% of destiny and 35% of the free will. And we can use the 35% of free will to overcome our destiny. And that is what we are supposed to use, and use the free will and do the spiritual practice. And through the spiritual practice, what happens? We can start thinking of others, the good qualities in us starts developing, because we are working with our personality defects, we are working with ego removal, we are working with spiritual love, we are thinking of sacrifice, service unto the truth. We will be in the company of the truth, that is the satsanga, and we'll be always chanting the name of God. You know, the chanting the name of God gives us lot of energy that is required, and that energy actually helps us to do all the other course of this Guru Kripa Yoga. Because of which, what is that we observe is that the final happiness, the whatever course you do, whatever activities you do, and whatever the thoughts that come to your mind are in a very critical situation, the personality defects that we are trying to remove will help us, or the qualities that we are trying to build help us to face any unforeseen situation or the unfortunate situation in a very calm way. So that is the effect of the spiritual practice. I agree, it is not possible in a day or two. Spiritual practice, we need to do it every day. On the basis of every day when we practice, I'm sure that all of us can lead towards this permanent happiness, which we call it as bliss. So this happiness, achieving this happiness, is a very easiest method in this era of Kali Yuga. Because as I said, we cannot sit for us together to do our spiritual practice. But in all our activities, maybe walking or while eating, we can start praying. We can start expressing our gratitude. We can start chanting. So you need not take out special time for that. When you're driving, you can start chanting. Or when you're cooking food, you can start chanting. What happens? So that becomes a practice, and it subsidizes all the other thoughts in the mind. You know, you can take an example of an ink bottle. So there is an ink in the ink bottle. If I pour water into that ink bottle, what happens? Initially, ink only will come out. But after a long time, when I put continuously water into it, what happens? All the ink inside the ink bottle comes out, and finally you get the pure water coming out of it. So similarly, when we start doing the spiritual practice, what happens? The black covering that we have seen, so all the defects, the thought of ego, the envy, whatever the defects we have, you may have little bit of the difficulty in overcoming that. But once we start practicing every day, definitely a day will come where we become pure from inside, and we can experience the supreme bliss within us, which is already there within us, but we need to enlighten ourselves through the regular practice of spirituality. So all these things, whatever that we have seen, can be done along with our daily routine. Whatever that we are doing it today, along with that, we can do all these things. Most of the things are related to the mind. We can start doing it along with the core daily course that we do it, so that we never know that when we are progressing spiritually. So That is the reason why many of these seekers have started following this path of spirituality, that is Guru Krupa Yoga, and have attained sainthood, and they have also liberated themselves from the cycle of birth and death. So that is the advantage of doing this spiritual practice. So I hope the kind of spiritual practice that we have understood today will definitely lead to lot of questions. How do we do it? Or what is the method of chanting? Or you may have a number of questions in understanding this concept, because the spirituality is a very vast concept. It is not possible to explain about this concept of spirituality in an hour or two. But I have just tried to give you an outline of why we are not happy or why we are questing for that happiness, and the reason for unhappiness we have understood. And the happiness, we cannot get it from the materialistic world. It is possible from only through which is permanent. And through the spiritual practice, what are the benefits we have understood. And to do this spiritual practice, it is not just only the theoretical knowledge that is sufficient, but practically we have to put it into our practice in a day-to-day life, daily basis. We have to do it. Maybe it is difficult, but still it is possible, so that once we start practicing it, definitely we are towards the right path. So when we start moving in the right path, we are sure that we are going to reach the destination. So we are here to understand the concept. We are just putting one step ahead. This one step will take us to hundreds of steps towards the God realization. Our Guru said that when we take one step towards God, the God takes 10 steps towards us. So, because we say that Bhava Tochi Deva. So, Bhava is nothing but spiritual emotion. So, if you have that feeling of presence of God, definitely the God also helps us to progress further in the spiritual world. So, it is my humble prayer to my Guru that let all of us get this eternal bliss by practicing the path of Guru Krupa Yoga, which has been proven path to achieve the spiritual progress. If you have any questions, it's open. The forum is open for question and answers. Anybody has got any questions, you can ask.
Hello. Hope, ma'am, I think there are no questions actually. Hello.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. No
Yeah,
problem.
there are no questions, but I would really like to say that it was a very enlightening, learning session this time, because this is what is important end of the day for all of us, to go back to our roots, is it not? Our Sanatana Dharma says we have to go back to the roots and, go through whichever possible way to attain that spiritual content, what you're talking about. This is very important in today's fast sessions, fast learning things. People do forget about these things. So last but not the least, I would really like to thank you on behalf of our forum members and the team. It was an excellent learning session, madam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to present the concepts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
So can we end the session?